Hi. You know what time it is. Storytime with Chris. I'm back. Hope everybody's having a good day. Hope everybody's doing really well. I don't own the music that you will hear in the background, but we're gonna go ahead and get started. Actually, I need to clean my glasses because they're dirty. Without further ado, we will begin. Chapter 9. May Goes Missing. The song of the cicada split the sky above the Sukomori laurel. Can you believe how hot it is? Miyako was watching the shadow of a dragonfly hovering over the bleached ground. Yep, Kazuko said. She dipped her bare foot in the water-filled trough and washed it dry in the sun over and over. Kazuko and Miyako were sitting by the pump in the backyard of the haunted mansion. They were cooling a big watermelon and their feet in the water trough. For more than 2 hours they had been waiting for Satsuki to come back from Tokyo. Miyako put her hand on the watermelon. It's getting nice and cold. Of course, the girls hadn't just been sitting since noon. They had walked to the Foxgrove bus stop 3 times to see if Satsuki would be on the next bus. If she didn't show, they walked back to the haunted house and pumped some more cold water into the trough. Since they didn't know when Satsuki was going to be back, they weren't sure how many times they'd have to wait at the bus stop. Shall we go again? Miyako said. Sure. Let's go. Kazuko kicked her wet feet into her sneakers. After Miyako pumped more cold water into the trough, they set off. The dragonfly resting in the nearby grass hummed into the air. At Foxgrove, the bus pulled up to the stop. Oh, it smells like Matsuko, Satsuki cried happily as she stepped out from the bus. Hey, what are you guys doing here? She said when she saw Miyako and Kazuko standing under the trees. Satsuki was wearing a frilly yellow dress and a bolero hat that Mrs. Terushima had selected. She looked like a French doll. Her wavy hair was held in place with a narrow ribbon, the same color as the dress. Yep, Grady Ogaki, she told us you were here. Coming back today, didn't she, Kazuko? Miyako said. After waiting all this time, the girls felt suddenly embarrassed. So my mother told us we should wait for you, and she got a watermelon. We took it over to Grady Ogaki's. No, I mean your house. Yep, Miyako stammered. Miyoko's bobbed, jet-black hair was dusty from walking back and forth between the bus stop and Satsuki's house. Gentle Kazuko just smiled. She was dripping with perspiration. Well, hello, is this the welcoming party? Tetsuo said as he climbed down the stairs. Satsuki smiled happily. 2 of her friends had come to meet her. Tatsuo set down the heavy trunk and briefcase he was carrying. Thanks for coming on such a hot day. How did you know which bus we were on? Hope you haven't been waiting here long. We came a few times, didn't we? Miyako looked at Kazuko. Yep, this is the 4th time, Kazuko nodded. Miyako smiled. She didn't usually speak to Tetsuo. His white cap, wire-rimmed glasses, and pale skin made him seem stylish. He was different from the teachers at school. Miyako was always a little tense around him. As they walked along, Miyako told Satsuki, There's a watermelon back at your house. We're getting it cold. Satsuki was pleased. She turned and looked back at Tetsuo. Daddy, Miyako and Kazuko brought a watermelon for us. Miyako wondered how Satsuki could speak so casually to her father. Of course, he was her father, but things were different at Miyoko's house. Everyone walked slowly, so May didn't have to run. Tetsuo looked down at her. May, there's cold watermelon waiting for us when we get back. What do you think of that? Nothing has changed in my old hometown. Flowers blooming, birds singing, the cool breeze. The children spread out over the road, sometimes walking ahead of Tatsuo, sometimes trailing behind. They walked out of the coolness of the Zelkova Grove into the flat, white heat of the village road. Hey, you guys, I've got something for you, too, Satsuki said. May was holding Kazuko's hand. Chocolate, she held. Bronson chocolate and fruit candy from Ekokuya fruit parlor. Grandma gave us lots of stuff for presents. Kazuko looked a little puzzled. She wasn't sure she knew what kind of presents these were. They stopped along the road to thank Granny for her help. Tetsuo gave her a box of fine green tea, a present from his mother-in-law. Then they walked on toward the haunted house. It was the hottest hour of the day, and the road was nearly deserted. The few people they did meet all said, "Welcome back." Everyone knew today was the day that the professor and his daughters would return from Tokyo. Word traveled fast from the small village. When they got to the house, Tetsuo hurried to throw open the shutters and windows. "Sure is good to be home," he said. Satsuki and May agreed completely. The house was shabby and the tatami mats were worn, but with the storm shutters thrown back, the rooms were just as bright and sunny as the overgrown garden. A cool breeze blew through the house. The startled dragonfly darted in and out of the study. Satsuki was glad to be back. She put her bags in Mommy's room and hurried out to the garden. She was worried about Totoro's seedlings. The plot was probably full of weeds by now, like the rest of the yard. Maybe I won't be able to tell the trees from the weeds, she thought. When she got there, the plot looked completely different from the rest of the world. Everything was tidier and more orderly than when they had left. In fact, it was a complete makeover. Someone had dug a trench about 8 inches wide around the edge of the plot. There was still a little water in the bottom. The plot looked moist and well watered. The rest of the yard was parched, but here the soil was black and glistening. Satsuki's side was attached to a new length of green bamboo. Someone had cut angled slots in the bamboo to hold the top and bottom edges of the side. The seedlings looked happy in the bright sunlight. All the weeds were gone. The plot was immaculate. "Satsuki, let's open presents," May called from the house. "Okay," Satsuki called over her shoulder. She took one more look at the seedlings and ran to the pub. "Come on, guys, let's eat," she said to Kazuko and Miyoko. "Shall we bring the watermelon?" Miyoko said. Kazuko was busy pumping cold water over it. "That's the biggest watermelon I've ever seen," said Satsuki. She tried to pick it up, but it slipped and slid away from her in the water. "You should change your clothes," said Kazuko. "You'll get your nice dress wet. We brought a net. We'll bring it into the kitchen for you." "Okay, I'll ask my dad to cut it for us." Satsuki ran back to the house. Miyoko and Kazuko exchanged glances, happy and a little scared. Another chance to talk to the professor. They ate the watermelon in the breezy living room. "Here's the chocolate." Satsuki gave each of her friends a slab of imported chocolate. The wrapper had a photo of a little blonde girl. "How many?" Tetsuo had a sign made to divide up the fruit candy. "Is it all right?" She had 5 pieces of candy in each little hand. "That's right, 5, Satsuki said. "And then there's 3 more each of us to eat right now," Tetsuo said. "So how many is that altogether?" he asked May. 8, Miyoko blurted out. The candy was wrapped in pretty paper. Gold, pink, blue, green, and rainbow of colors. Each girl had her own opinion about how the candy should be divided up. One wanted at least 2 gold and 2 green. Another wanted 1 of each color. It was hard to decide. "Better eat the watermelon before it gets warm," Tetsuo said. The children each took a slice of watermelon, but their eyes were still on the chocolate and fruit candy. "Is this the watermelon from your garden?" Tetsuo asked Miyoko. She nodded and looked at Satsuki. "Satsuki, can I take the other 3 candies home with me?" Kazuko had just popped a candy in her mouth. She hurriedly took it out, looked at it sadly, and put it back. As Satsuki munched on her watermelon, she said, "Do you know who took care of our garden out by the pine tree? Was that you?" "No," Miyoko shook her head emphatically. "That was Kanta. Kanta was here every day." The little seedlings cast shadows in the moonlight and trembled in the warm, gentle breeze. Satsuki stroked them with a fingertip. "Grow big and strong," she whispered. She hadn't had time to greet her seedlings properly until now. It must feel good to have everything so nice and neat. I better remember to thank Kanta for this. Tetsuo was in the study organizing his field notes. May was busy too, carefully arranging her loot in her toy box. A deck of cards, a Chinese checker set, and other treasures. Mommy would soon be back and her room had to be neat. Satsuki felt a deep sense of peace as she stroked the seedlings. She wished they would grow into a forest soon. Grow big and strong. "We're waiting for you." In fact, the seedlings didn't seem to have gotten any bigger since the sisters had left for Tokyo. "I guess Totoro didn't come while we were gone." Excuse me. "Otherwise, I'm sure you'd all be 3 times bigger." The night was lovely. The seedlings huddled close to the ground. They looked almost apologetic for not being bigger already. Next day, Satsuki drew up a cleaning plan and posted it on the wall in the living room. She wanted the house to be spotless when Yasuko came home from the hospital. After their 10 days with the Tenoshimas, the haunted house looked dirty, inconvenient, and uncomfortable. Mommy's visit was special, and Satsuki wanted her to have fun. Excuse me. She had to get her summer assignment in shape to turn in, too. It was time to buckle down and get to work. August 20th. Yasuko would be home in 6 days. First on the list, clean the kitchen. Miyako and Kazuo dropped by to help. 3 girls wiped everything down, though when Satsuki tried to wipe down the stove, it just spread the dirt. She and her friends had lots of fun cleaning the kitchen together. Kazuko and Miyako treated Mei like a queen, which put her in quite a good mood. August 21st. Get up early and water Totoro's seedlings. Do a little weeding. Today's cleaning. Toilet and bath. Satsuki and Mei were getting more and more excited. Mommy's going to take a bath with us. We can sleep with her all night. They ended the day by having a fight. You're 7 years older than Mei. You should know better, Tetsuo scolded her. August 22nd. Satsuki broke 2 cups and a plate as she carried the dishes into the living room. She chased Mei into Mommy's room to keep her away from the broken china and set her to work making a welcome garland out of a paper chain. Mei worked hard to make paper links with scissors and glue. August 23rd. 3 days till Yasuko came home. Satsuki got Tetsuo to help her air the futons. Next on the list, wash the sheets. Satsuki decided it would be faster to use a bristle brush and scrub the sheets on the washing board. The result? Ripped sheets. So much for that idea. In the evening, she was so tired that she lay down for a nap before taking her bath and ended up sleeping till the next morning. Tetsuo had to carry her to bed. August 24th. Miyako and Kazuko dropped by again to help. They cleaned the sliding glass doors that looked out to the garden and hung the welcome garland over the door to Mommy's room. Mei's paper chain wasn't nearly long enough, so Miyako and Kazuko worked with her to make more. Yasuko will be home in 2 days. Satsuki decided to make a welcome sign to hang on the wall. She ground black ink on Tetsuo's inkstone and wrote, "Welcome home. Congratulations on your recovery." With a calligraphy brush on a large sheet of paper, as she wrote the characters, she pictured her mother's graceful figure. Yasuko would cross the footbridge and walk quickly up the path. She would smile. Her cheeks would dimple and her small white teeth would sparkle. She was always playful, always laughing. When Mommy saw her room, how happy she'd be. August 25th, Friday. 1 day left. White thunderheads rose against a deep blue sky. The weather was perfect. Since today was Tetsuo's day to go to the Research Institute, Granny took charge of Satsuki and Mei. 3 of them decided to spend the afternoon in her vegetable garden collecting fresh vegetables for Yasuko to eat. Granny's garden was in a clearing on the hill behind her house. It supplied the Ogaki family with all of its vegetables, corn and tomatoes, eggplant and cucumbers, kidney beans, and soybeans. The summer vegetables stood in neat rows, with pretty beds of winter cherry and moss rose around the edges of the garden. There were amazingly tall sunflowers in groups of 2 or 3. The garden reminded the children of Granny herself. Now and then a red and blue weather vane would clatter into motion and swivel toward a gust of wind, then fell silent again. With Granny's help, Satsuki and Mei picked up lots of different vegetables. As she walked the rows of plants, the old woman skillfully plucked vegetables and put her in her basket. It was not that easy for Satsuki and Mei. Cucumbers and eggplants pricked their fingers when they tried to pull them off. They couldn't seem to pick the kidney beans at all, no matter how much they tugged. The corn was a mystery. They couldn't tell which ears was ready to harvest and which were not. Satsuki rushed from plant to plant, exclaiming, "Ouch!" and "That hurts!" Granny thought she had never seen her so happy. Satsuki had always seemed energetic and cheerful, and it was only now that Granny understood that most of the time Satsuki was putting up a brave front. Compared to Satsuki, little Mei was her usual self, changeable as the weather, but not feeling things so deeply as her sister. "How long will your mother be visiting?" Granny asked Satsuki. "She's going back on Monday." 3 days and 2 nights, Satsuki smiled happily. "But the doctor said that if she does all right, she can come home for good." "Well, we better make sure she eats lots of delicious food while she's here so she can build up her strength. I'll cook up some red rice to welcome her." The sun beat down in the garden. It was stingfully hot. As they sat in the shade of an oak tree and had a snack, Mommy's visit was all the girls could talk about. Even as she ate, Mei would let go of the big ear of corn she had picked herself. "Granny, I get to sleep in Mommy's futon tomorrow when it's nighttime," she said. She took a big bite out of a cucumber that had cooled in the spring that bubbled up near the garden. "Isn't that nice?" "That will be wonderful," Granny said. "You can stay at our house, too, if you want to," Mei added generously. She put her ear of corn on her shoulder and beamed. She looked so pleased. Granny couldn't resist teasing her a little. "Mei, did you pick that corn for me? That was very nice of you." "No, this isn't for you." Mei's eyes widened in surprise. "This is for Mommy. It's not for you." Satsuki had already eaten a cucumber, a tomato, and then another cucumber. Everything tastes so fresh, she said. Telegram! It's a telegram! Kanta came running up the path between the tomato and taro plants. Satsuki, May, and Granny was still smiling when he held the telegram out to Satsuki. They gave it to Mom. You were home, Kanta said in his usual gruff manner. Satsuki stood up in surprise. A telegram? For me? She took the envelope and searched for the addressee. It says it's for Tatsuo Kusakabe. Daddy won't be home till tonight. Granny, what should I do? Open it. It might be an emergency, Granny said. Satsuki was nervous. Telegrams usually meant something unpleasant. She unfolded the telegram. It says, Please contact Shishiko Kuyama Hospital. Something must have happened to Mommy. May clutched her ear of corn tightly and peered anxiously from one face to another. Satsuki looked ready to cry. Kanta looked serious. Granny's face was pale. Did Mommy die? May said. Granny was shocked. Nonsense, don't say that, May. Satsuki, you better telephone right away. Phone who? Where? Satsuki said, Why, your father, of course. You know the number, don't you? Yes, at the Research Institute, but our house doesn't have a phone. Kanta, take Satsuki to Uncle's house. She can use their phone. Granny said. Her tone was stern. There was no time to childish objections, like not wanting to set foot in Uncle's house without a grown-up, or not wanting the rest of the village to see him walking with Satsuki. Uncle's house was the Ogaki family seat and the largest house in the village. It stood near the Zelkovas of Foxgrove. The property was big enough for its own small forest. The house was surrounded by an imposing hedge of holly olive. Kanta only went there 2 or 3 times a year, in summer and at New Year's. His parents always acted humble and eager to please Uncle. It made Kanta uncomfortable. His heart was pounding as he stepped over the broad threshold of Uncle's house into the cool, dark entryway with Satsuki. He took off his cap. Hello, it's me, Kanta. Can we use your telephone? Satsuki was so distracted with worry that she didn't notice someone getting up from the hearth in the big front room. It was Uncle, Granny's older brother. Kanta, what is it? Uncle stood there on the dark, polished floor looking down at him intently. Please let my friend use the telephone. She got a telegram. Granny says she should call her dad. Uncle looked impassively at Satsuki. She took a step forward. Please let me use your telephone. I'm Satsuki Kusakabe. Ah, Uncle nodded. The archaeologist's daughter. Satsuki said, Thank you, slipped off her sandals and went straight to the telephone, which was attached to a pillar at the back of the room. She called the operator, read the number off the wall next to the phone, and gave her Tatsuo's number at the Research Institute. Satsuki hung up and sat down on the stool by the pillar to wait for her father to call back. She didn't say a word. She just stared at the floor and tried to keep from crying. Is someone ill? Uncle asked. Yes, my mother. That was all Satsuki said. Uncle was the only person in the village who had been to university. He owned a lot of land and had a hand in most village business. Kanta hardly ever spoke with him. He could never figure out what Uncle was thinking. Kanta twisted his cap in his hands and stood frozen on the smooth floor of the entryway, watching nervously as Uncle gazed calmly at Satsuki. Kanta hoped she wouldn't do anything to embarrass him. When Tatsuo called back, Satsuki told him about the telegram. He told her to wait while he called the hospital. When he called back the second time, Uncle and Kanta knew that Yasuko's visit had been canceled. Thank you, Satsuki said weakly as she slipped on her sandals and walked slowly outside. Kanta didn't know what to do. Uncle just motioned with his chin for Kanta to follow her. When Satsuki realized Kanta was behind her, she ran all the way home, dashing across the footbridge and up the path. As she rushed in from the garden, May hurried out of the kitchen looking worried. When Satsuki saw the paper garland over the door to Mommy's room, the pain struck hard. She stalked into the room. Her hands were cold and her lips were trembling. She was wrapped in a yellow fog. In a fury, she ripped the welcome sign to shreds. She tore down the garland and the other decorations. No, stop it, May wailed. That's for Mommy. Granny was in the kitchen making rice, but when she heard May's voice, she came rushing in. May was following Satsuki around the room, whimpering pitifully as her sister destroyed the decorations they had worked so hard to make. Quit whining, Satsuki turned to her and yelled. She's not coming home. We wasted our time. No, Mommy will come. May was wide-eyed with fear. She's coming tomorrow. No, she isn't, May. She's not coming at all. Daddy called the hospital. You don't know anything. Satsuki didn't want to bully her sister, but right now she had to bully someone. She's sick, so tough luck. If she comes home, she might get even worse. May began to sob miserably. No, 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 no. She shook her head. I want Mommy. She's coming tomorrow. She promised. You don't care if she dies, do you? All you ever think about is yourself. Fine, do what you want. Just leave me out of it. Kanto watched helplessly from the garden. Satsuki stood staring at the wall. Granny gently stroked her back. Now, Satsuki, there's a good girl. This isn't like you. Please be careful. You're going to scare me. The moment Granny said this, Satsuki, cheerful, brave Satsuki, began to cry. A loud wail that came from deep inside. She sounded so full of despair that Kanta almost felt like crying too. May stopped crying and stared at her sister in astonishment. Granny put her arms around Satsuki. Come now, don't worry. I'm sure your mother is all right. Remember what your father said? She'll be just fine. Satsuki only cried harder. When her mother fell ill, Tetsuo had also said everything was all right and she would be just fine. She'll only be in the hospital for a few days, he said, and then the doctor told them that Mommy would have died without medicine. The tears poured out of Satsuki like a flood. Satsuki, if you keep crying like that, the crows and dragonflies will come from all over Matsugo to see what's wrong. The mountains and the fields will laugh at you. Granny kept talking slowly, soothingly. No mother would die and leave a sweet little girl like you alone in the world. Everything's going to be just fine. You'll see. Satsuki cried and cried, enough to call all the crows and all the dragonflies from the mountains and all the fields. No one would have guessed that losing her mother's visit would hurt so much. It was late afternoon when they noticed that May had disappeared. The towering summer clouds were turning blood red and it was getting dark in the house. The shadows in the garden were lengthening. Satsuki had finally calmed down. She finished filling the bath and went into the living room where Granny was folding clothes. What's May up to? She asked. I don't know, Granny said. I thought she was with you. No, I thought she was with you. The evening cicadas were singing loudly in the bamboo grove behind the house. May's sandals were nowhere to be found. May! May! Satsuki called from the back door. The yard was silent and deserted. May, answer me! May! She ran to the garden. The red of the western sky was deepening. She ran back to the house. Granny was on the veranda looking uneasily at the sky. Did you find her? Granny said. She's not in the garden. Did you look in the house? I looked everywhere. Maybe she went to the bus stop. I don't know. I'll find out. Satsuki turned to Granny. Put a hand on her shoulder. Satsuki, you have to stay calm. Think, where would May go by herself? A place she would go without telling anyone. Satsuki gasped. She looked stricken. She might have gone to the hospital. Shichiko Yoma? Don't be silly. That's a 3-hour walk, even for a grown-up. I have a feeling that's where she went. I better try to find her. Satsuki dashed toward the road with Granny calling after her. On the way she ran past Kanto, who was coming up the path with a basket of food from his mother. Kanto, leave that here and go get your father, quick as you can, Granny said. We can't find May. Satsuki cut down the patties and ran as fast as she could down the narrow dirt road toward the hospital. May! May! She cried. Soon her voice was getting hoarse, but she kept calling. She couldn't stop running. Soon it would be dark. May! May was missing, and it was Satsuki's fault. She had yelled at May and told her she didn't care. She had vented all of her frustration on her little sister. May! Satsuki stood on the bridge over the Matsui River and looked fearfully down into the water. A farmer was cutting grass at the top of a rise on the other side of the river. Satsuki ran toward him, wiping tears from her eyes. Maybe he had seen May. She prayed that he had. Please, can you help me? She called to the farmer anxiously. Did you see a little girl come by? She's about this big. Satsuki held her hand out to show the farmer. A little girl, was it? The farmer said, looking down at her. My sister. She's 4. I've been here all day, but I can't say I saw a little girl, the farmer said regretfully. The setting sun tinted the grassy slope. Satsuki ran to the top of the rise and looked across the fields and down the road toward the hospital. The road ran through potato fields that spread on either side. The landscape was empty. Are you sure she came this way? The farmer asked. Better hurry, it'll be dark soon. The farmer was right. The crows called to each other as they flew to the roosts in the woods. It was already night among the trees. The sun was almost hidden in the dark clouds low in the western sky. Satsuki looked anxiously toward Shichiko Yoma. She hurried down to the road through the tall grass and brambles and kept on running. May! May, where are you? Somebody help me. Has she lost her sister? Satsuki could feel herself starting to cry. The huge clouds over her head were edged with black. The red sky was deepening to darkness. Your fault. Your fault. Your fault. A three-wheeled motorbike came putting toward her. Satsuki stood in the middle of the road and waved her arms for the driver to stop. The motorbike was coming from Tsuchiko Kiyoma, but the young couple on the bike just shook their heads and told Satsuki they hadn't seen anyone. The sound of the idling motor reminded Satsuki of the day they had moved to the haunted house. She and May had ridden in the back of the truck with the books and furniture. How she wished she could turn back the clock to that day. "Where are you coming from?" asked the man. "Matsugo," Satsuki told him. "Matsugo? That's a long way." "Well, there's no one up this road, I'm sure of that." There was no use going further. May couldn't have come this far by herself. Satsuki dipped her head in thanks and the young couple drove away. Satsuki was trudging back when she heard Kanta's voice. She ran toward the sound. Maybe they found May. "Satsuki! Satsuki!" Kanta came down the road on a bicycle that was too big for him. He stood on one pedal and pushed himself along with the other foot. "Go back to Matsugo," he said. "They haven't found May yet." "But she's not in Matsugo. I'm sure she tried to go to the hospital and got lost somewhere." "That's right. It's your fault. You frightened her. You rejected her. You abandoned her." "They found a sandal in Shin Pond. Granny's waiting for you." "The pond? Did May drown?" May couldn't swim. Satsuki could see May struggling in the dark water, gulping it in, suffering, drowning. "Help me, Satsuki. Please, Mommy. Help me. Somebody help me." The sea of rice stalks and the patties were dark and silent as Satsuki ran toward the pond. The patties gave off a sweet fragrance in the failing light. Satsuki tripped and fell. Irritated, she took off her sandals and ran the rest of the way in her bare feet. When the pond came into sight, she could see that half the village was watching the search for May's body. The village policeman stood by his bicycle. Kanta's father was probing the water with a bamboo pole. Members of the local fire brigade were diving into the water to search the body. "Granny, she's here!" Kazuko pointed to Satsuki, running toward them. "I'm sorry, May. Help me, Daddy. I'm sorry, Mother. Help me." Granny went to meet her. The crowd parted. Satsuki ran up to her and Granny held out a little white sandal. "It's not May." Satsuki sank to the ground, gasping for breath. "Her sandals aren't white. They're brown." Granny fell to her knees, too, in relief. Satsuki was still gasping for breath. She felt faint. For a long time she couldn't stand up. May hadn't drowned. At least that was good news. And that is where we will end for today. We will be back tomorrow to finish My Neighbor Totoro. I'm going to go ahead and reveal our next book. So, I was going to, and I more than likely will do it. I have a lot to heal and to sift through. So, thank you for your patience with me. I really, really appreciate it. Mental health is very important, and depression and anxiety is real. So I decided to try to find all the Studio Ghibli movies that I know and love and find their novelizations. Most of them are based off of actual books. Some of them are original works by Hayao Miyazaki or Isao Takahata or any of the other fabulous directors of those other films. So, our next book is by one of my favorite authors of all time, besides Ursula K. Le Guin and Anne McCaffrey and Piers Anthony and Terry Pratchett. But Diana Wynne Jones, Howl's Moving Castle. If you're familiar with the film, there are going to be some differences in the book adaptation that were not able to make it to the film's adaptation. So, we will be starting that once we are done with Totoro. I'm trying to see. Where is the. Yep, there's 21 chapters in this book, so. Yeah. I will see you all next time. Peace, y'all.